Captain Jack Morrison stood at the observation deck of the Wanderer, watching the stars drift past. He had been in space for 15 years now, ever since humanity joined the Galactic Council. The view never got old, but the politics certainly did. The Wanderer was a human diplomatic vessel, assigned to work with the Velcrin Collective. The Velcrin were tall, blue-skinned beings with 4 arms and eyes that glowed like amber. They were also incredibly boring. Jack had sat through hundreds of meetings with them, and every single one followed the same rigid protocol that hadn't changed in 1,000 years. Today was different, though. Today, something went wrong. Jack was on Epsilon Prime, a massive space station that served as a trading hub between human and Velcrin space. The station was huge, home to over 50,000 beings from a dozen different species. Humans ran the medical bay because somehow humanity had become the galaxy's favorite doctors. The aliens loved human medicine, but didn't want humans as full members of their empires. It was a strange arrangement. Jack was in the middle of a trade negotiation when the alarm started blaring. The entire station shook. People screamed. The Velcrin representative he was talking to turned a lighter shade of blue, which Jack had learned meant they were terrified. "What happened?" Jack asked, standing up quickly. The Velcrin couldn't speak. They just stared at the ceiling, trembling. Jack ran out of the room and found chaos in the corridors. Aliens were running in every direction. Security officers were shouting orders that nobody followed. Through a viewport, Jack could see debris floating past. A small asteroid had hit the station's outer ring. Jack made his way to the command center. The human contingent was already there, trying to help. A young medical officer named Kate Sullivan was setting up triage stations. She looked up when Jack entered. "Captain Morrison," she said, "we have casualties. 5 Velcrin are dead. 30 more are injured." 5 dead. It was tragic, but the station had 50,000 people. In the scope of things, it could have been much worse. But when Jack looked around, he saw something he couldn't understand. The entire station was shutting down. Velcrin officers were abandoning their posts. Some were just sitting on the floor, rocking back and forth. "Why are they acting like this?" Jack asked Kate. She shook her head. "I don't know. I've seen them panic before when someone gets hurt, but this is different. It's like the world is ending." Over the next few days, Jack watched as Epsilon Prime effectively stopped functioning. The Velcrin held ceremonies for the 5 who died. The ceremonies lasted for weeks. Trade stopped. Meetings were canceled. The entire Velcrin government sent representatives to mourn. Jack had seen death before. He'd been in the military during Earth's last conflict back before First Contact. He'd lost friends. It hurt, deeply, but life went on. You mourned, you remembered, and you kept moving. The Velcrin didn't seem capable of that. They acted like 5 deaths were an apocalyptic catastrophe. When Jack finally returned to Earth for his scheduled leave, he met with Kate Sullivan again. She had been transferred to the Human Diplomatic Corps headquarters in Geneva. Kate was brilliant, a trained doctor who had shifted to diplomacy because she wanted to understand the aliens better. "I've been researching something," Kate told him over coffee in the headquarters cafeteria. "I wanted to know why we keep getting rejected." "Rejected?" Jack asked. "For full membership," Kate explained. "We've applied to join the Velcrin Collective as full members 3 times, the Oshari Dominion twice, the Zenthari Commonwealth once. Every time they say no. They want our technology. They want our doctors. They want our trade. But they won't let us join." Jack frowned. "Why not?" Kate pulled out a tablet and showed him classified files. She had clearance Jack didn't have, being part of the Diplomatic Intelligence Division now. "I found the first contact reports, the real ones, not the public versions. Jack, the aliens are terrified of us." "Terrified? Why?" "Because we accept death," Kate said simply. "Look at this. The average Velcrin lives for about 900 years. The Oshari live for 1200. The Zenthari live even longer. They have technology that extends their lives, heals almost any injury, even transfers consciousness into new bodies if needed. Death, for them, is rare and preventable. Jack thought about the reaction on Epsilon Prime. 5 deaths in a station of 50,000, and everything stopped. They don't know how to handle it. More than that, Kate said. They can't handle it. Their entire civilization is built on avoiding death. Every law, every custom, every bit of their culture assumes that death is the worst thing that can happen. It's not just fear. It's beyond that. Death is their ultimate horror. And humans? Kate smiled sadly. We die, Jack. Average lifespan is about 120 years now with our medical technology. We've always died. Every human culture in history has had to deal with death. We have funerals, we have ceremonies, we have philosophies about it. We make art about death, we write stories about it, we accept it as part of life. So they think we're crazy. Or dangerous, Kate said. I think they believe that anyone who accepts death might not value life properly. They don't understand that we can do both. Jack was about to respond when every screen in the cafeteria suddenly changed. The news feeds, the information displays, even people's personal devices all showed the same thing. An emergency broadcast from the Galactic Council. Something had happened at the council chambers. Jack and Kate rushed to the command center where they could get better information. The room was packed with diplomats and military officers, all watching the live feed. The council chambers on the neutral station of Concordia was in chaos. Alien representatives were fleeing the room. Some had collapsed. Security was trying to restore order but seemed just as panicked as everyone else. Then the camera focused on the center of the chamber. There was a figure there, tall and still. It was hard to look at directly. The image seemed to shift and blur. Some people watching the feed saw a figure in dark robes. Others saw something different. Jack saw a tall being, neither male nor female, with eyes that held infinite patience. "What is that?" someone asked. Kate's face had gone pale. "I think," she said slowly, "that's death." The figure spoke. Its voice came through clearly, despite the chaos around it. "I have come with an offer," it said, "but not for all of you. Only for humanity." The human ambassador was still in the chamber, Jack realized. Ambassador Ryan Collins stood alone while every alien representative had fled. Ryan was an older man, experienced and calm. He didn't run. He just stood there and waited. "Humanity," the figure continued, "you are unique among all species in this galaxy. You accept what others deny. You embrace what they flee from. You understand the balance." Jack felt a chill run down his spine. Around him, the command center had gone completely silent. Every human in the room was watching with complete attention. "I am the end of all things," the figure said. "I am the balance. I am death. And I wish to offer humanity a partnership." Ryan Collins took a step forward. His voice was steady. "What kind of partnership?" Death turned to face him fully. "Work with me. Help me maintain the balance that these empires have disrupted. In exchange, I will give you knowledge, protection, and freedom. You will become something new in this galaxy, something necessary." "And the cost?" Ryan asked. "You must remain mortal," Death said. "No life extension beyond natural limits. No, the council chamber stayed empty for 3 days after Death appeared. No alien representative would enter it. They said the room was cursed, tainted, dangerous. Only the human delegation remained on Concordia Station, led by Ambassador Ryan Collins. Kate Sullivan had been promoted rapidly after the appearance. Her research into alien attitudes toward death suddenly became the most important intelligence Earth had. She was now part of Ryan's advisory team, sitting in meetings with officials from every major Earth government. Ryan called a meeting in the human section of the station. Around the table sat military commanders, scientists, diplomats, and philosophers. Everyone wanted to speak, but Ryan held up his hand. "Let's start with the facts," he said. "Kate, tell us what we know about death." Kate pulled up her data on the main screen. Death is not a metaphor or a concept. It's a real entity, possibly billions of years old. Every species has myths about it, but most modern civilizations dismissed those myths as primitive superstition. Based on what we've learned, death is a fundamental force of the universe, like gravity or time. "Can we trust it?" asked General Paul Martinez, head of Earth's Defense Forces. "That's the wrong question," Kate replied. "Trust implies deception is possible. Death doesn't lie. It just is. When someone dies, they die. It's not negotiable. Death is offering us a partnership based on what we already do naturally." "But why us?" asked Dr. Lisa Ward, a biologist. "Why only humanity?" Kate looked at Ryan, who nodded for her to continue. "Because we're the only species that accepts mortality. Every other advanced civilization has spent thousands of years trying to avoid death. They see it as a problem to solve. We see it as part of life." A philosopher named George Chen spoke up. "In my research, every human culture has death rituals. We bury our dead, we cremate them, we hold ceremonies. We write about death, sing about it, paint it. We have sayings like live life to the fullest and make every day count, because we know our time is limited. The aliens don't have any of that." "So what does death actually want from us?" Martinez asked. As if in answer, the lights in the room dimmed. The temperature dropped. And death appeared again, standing at the head of the table. Half the people jumped to their feet. Ryan remained seated, calm. "I want balance," Death said. Its voice was quiet but clear. "The three great empires have disrupted the natural cycle. They extend life artificially. They prevent death through technology. They transfer minds into new bodies when the old ones fail. They have existed for so long that they have forgotten how to change." "Why is that a problem?" Ryan asked. Death moved around the table, seeming to glide rather than walk. "Growth requires death. New ideas require old ones to pass away. Evolution requires selection. Without death, there is only stagnation. The empires are dying civilizations. They simply refuse to admit it." "Show us," Kate said suddenly. Everyone looked at her, surprised at her boldness. "Show us what you mean." Death tilted its head as if considering. Then it waved a hand and the room disappeared. Suddenly, they were standing on a Velcrin world, watching a city below them. But something was wrong. The buildings were ancient, thousands of years old. The streets followed the same patterns they had for millennia. Nothing new was being built. "This is Velcros Prime, their capital world," Death said. "The beings you see below are the same ones who founded this city 12,000 years ago. They still rule. They still make the laws. They still control everything. Nothing changes because no one dies. No one retires. No one steps aside for the next generation." The scene shifted. Now they were watching a Velcrin school. Children sat in classrooms, learning from teachers who had taught the same lessons for 800 years. The curriculum hadn't changed. The teaching methods hadn't changed. Everything was exactly as it had been for centuries. "Innovation requires new perspectives," Death continued. "But how can there be new perspectives when the same individuals have held the same positions for thousands of years? They are brilliant, yes, experienced beyond measure. But they are also trapped in their own thinking, unable to imagine anything different." Another shift. They saw research laboratories where scientists worked on the same projects they had started 500 years ago. Not because the projects were difficult, but because there was no pressure to finish, no deadline, no urgency. When you live for 1,000 years, why rush? "This is what immortality brings," Death said. "Not progress, but paralysis." They returned to the meeting room on Concordia. Everyone was shaken. Lisa Ward spoke first, her voice unsteady. But surely life extension is good. Surely giving people more time is better. More time to do what? Death asked. When there is always more time, nothing is precious. When there is always tomorrow, why act today? Humans understand this instinctively. You have sayings. Life is short. Seize the day. Time waits for no one. You create urgency from your mortality. It drives you to achieve, to create, to love deeply while you can. Ryan leaned forward. What exactly would this partnership entail? Death sat down at the table, a gesture that seemed almost human. If humanity accepts, certain individuals will become my reapers. They will gain the ability to see the threads of life and death that connect all beings. They will know when someone is meant to die naturally. More importantly, they will see when death has been prevented artificially, when the natural order has been disrupted. And what would these reapers do? Martinez asked, suspicion in his voice. Restore balance, Death said, not through killing. I do not need servants who kill. Death comes naturally to all things eventually. But the empires have created technologies that trap beings in a state between life and death. Consciousness stored in machines. Bodies kept alive artificially for centuries past their natural end. Clone farms where the dead are reborn endlessly. These disruptions cause ripples throughout reality, weakening the fabric of existence itself. Kate was taking notes rapidly. What would humanity gain from this partnership? Knowledge, Death said. I have witnessed the rise and fall of 1,000,000 civilizations. I know secrets that no living being remembers. I will share this knowledge with humanity. Protection. The empires will turn against you for accepting my offer. They fear death above all else, and they will fear you by association. I will ensure that humanity survives their hostility. Freedom. You will no longer need the empire's approval or their technology. You will forge your own path in the galaxy, unbeholden to civilizations that cannot change. And the price? Ryan asked again. You must accept your mortality fully, Death said. No life extension beyond natural healing, no mind transfers, no artificial preservation. When a human's time comes, they must go peacefully. Your average lifespan will remain about 120 years. In a galaxy where others live 10 times longer, you will be brief flames, but you will burn brightly. The room was silent for a long moment. Finally, George Chen spoke. In philosophy, we have a concept called memento mori. Remember that you will die. It's not meant to be depressing. It's meant to remind us to live fully, to value each moment, to not waste the time we have. Every great achievement in human history came from people who knew their time was limited. But we could live forever, Martinez argued. The Velcrin have offered us their life extension technology if we refuse this offer. We could have both. Long life and innovation. Could we? Death asked. Look at your own history. Your greatest leaders, your most brilliant artists, your boldest explorers. They achieved greatness in lifetimes of 60, 70, 80 years. Now you live to 120, and you achieve even more. But the Velcrin, who live for 900 years, what have they achieved recently? What great works of art have they created in the last 1,000 years? What scientific breakthroughs? What new philosophies? No one had an answer. Kate had researched this too. Velcrin culture had been essentially static for 3,000 years. They had great works, ancient masterpieces, but nothing new, nothing fresh. Their last major scientific discovery had been 800 years ago. I am not asking you to worship death, Death continued. I am not asking you to seek it or celebrate it. I am asking you to accept it as part of the cycle. Birth, growth, life, death. Each is necessary. Each has its place. Ryan looked around the table at his team. This is bigger than us. This is a decision for all of humanity. We need to take this back to Earth. I will give you 6 months, Death said. Let your people debate. Let them choose freely. But know this. I have offered this partnership to other species before. All refused. They chose immortality. Some are now extinct, victims of their own stagnation. Others became the empires you see today, vast and powerful but hollow, empty, dead in everything but the technical sense. You are the first species in this galaxy to truly understand mortality, Death continued. Your art celebrates life because you know it ends. Your love is deeper because you know it is temporary. Your achievements matter because you have limited time to achieve them. This is your strength. Do not abandon it for the false promise of immortality. Death stood. I will await your answer. Choose wisely, humanity. The choice you make will echo through the ages. The entity vanished, leaving the humans alone. For a long moment, no one spoke. Then Ryan stood up. We have 6 months, he said. We need to present this to Earth's governments and let the people decide. This is too important for any small group to choose. Kate, I want you to prepare a full report. Martinez, work with your people on security implications. Everyone else? Start thinking about what this means. As the meeting broke up, Kate found herself standing at the window, looking out at the stars. Jack Morrison, who had been sitting quietly in the back, came to stand beside her. 6 months passed quickly. Earth had never seen such a debate. Every news channel, every social platform, every public space became a forum for discussion about Death's offer. Kate Sullivan watched it all from Geneva, compiling reports and analyzing public opinion. The arguments against accepting were powerful. The Velcrin had privately offered humanity their life extension technology, promising lifespans of 800 years or more. The Oshari Dominion offered full membership in their empire, something they had never offered before. The Zenthari Commonwealth promised access to their most advanced science. All humanity had to do was refuse Death's partnership. We could have everything, argued Senator Helen Price during a televised debate. Long life, advanced technology, full acceptance into galactic society. Why would we throw that away to stay mortal? But there were other voices, too. Dr. Raymond Clark, a historian, pointed out what Kate had discovered. In the 3,000 years of recorded Velcrin history, they have produced the same amount of art and literature that humanity produced in just the last 50 years. They live 10 times longer than us, but they achieve less. Why? Because they have no urgency. No pressure, no deadline. A young activist named Sophie Miller went viral with a simple video. She stood in front of a camera and said, "My grandmother lived to be 115. She was a teacher, a mother, a volunteer. She lived fully until her last day. She didn't waste time because she knew she didn't have forever. If she had known she would live for 900 years, would she have lived as fully? I don't think so. I think she would have put things off, waited for later, and later would never come." Jack Morrison was back on Earth during the debate, having been recalled from diplomatic service. He spoke at military academies and public forums. "I've fought alongside aliens," he told audiences. "They're brave, intelligent, capable. But there's something different about humans in combat. We fight like every battle might be our last, because it might be. The aliens fight cautiously because they have centuries ahead of them to lose. That's not a criticism. It's just different. Death makes us bold." The religious communities were divided. Some saw death as an enemy of faith, others as a natural part of divine order. Rabbi David Goldstein wrote, "Our texts say that we are mortal beings, created from dust and returning to dust. This is not a curse but a truth. To deny death is to deny our fundamental nature." Imam Fatima Hassan added, "We have always known that life is temporary. This knowledge shapes how we live, how we treat each other, how we value each moment. The offer is not asking us to change. It is asking us to remain who we have always been." Buddhist teacher Chen Wei said simply, "All things are impermanent." This is not suffering but wisdom. To cling to permanent existence is to miss the point of existence itself. The debate raged for months. Polls showed the population split almost evenly. Then, in the final month, something shifted. A video essay by a philosophy student named Alex Turner spread across Earth. It was simple but powerful. "Look at our greatest humans," Alex said. "The ones we remember, the ones we celebrate. Einstein died at 76, Marie Curie at 66, Martin Luther King Jr. at 39, Van Gogh at 37. They didn't need centuries to make a difference. They burned bright and brief, and we still remember them. Now look at the Velkrin. Can you name a single Velkrin artist? A single Velkrin leader from the last 1,000 years? Neither can I, because they're all the same ones from 2,000 years ago, still doing the same things. Which would you rather be? A brief candle that lights the darkness, or an eternal lamp that no one notices because it's always been there?" The referendum was held on a Tuesday. Every human on Earth and in the colonies had the chance to vote. The question was simple. Should humanity accept death's partnership? Kate stayed up all night watching the results come in. Region by region, the votes were tallied. It was close, incredibly close. Asia voted yes by a narrow margin. Europe was split almost perfectly. Africa voted yes more strongly. North America was divided. South America voted yes. When the final count came in, Kate felt tears in her eyes. 67% of humanity had voted yes. They had chosen to remain mortal. Ryan Collins made the official announcement to the Galactic Council. Death appeared again in the chamber, and this time the alien representatives had to watch from remote locations, too afraid to be in the same room. Ryan stood alone with death and spoke clearly. "Humanity has made its choice. We accept your partnership. We will remain mortal and we will work with you to maintain the balance." The moment the words were spoken, Kate felt something change. It was like a shift in the air, a new awareness. She was sitting in her office in Geneva when it happened. Suddenly, she could see things she had never seen before. Threads of light, silver and glowing, connecting everything around her. People walking past her window had threads extending from them, stretching out into the distance. Some threads were thick and bright. Others were thin and faded. Her phone rang. It was Jack Morrison. "Kate, are you seeing this?" "The threads?" she asked. "Yes. What are they?" "I think they're lifelines," Jack said. His voice was filled with wonder. "I can see when people are going to die. Not the exact moment, but a sense of it. The bright threads are people with decades left. The faded ones are people near the end." Kate realized he was right. She focused on an elderly man sitting in the park below her office. His thread was very thin, very pale. Not in pain, just old and tired. His natural end was close. She felt no urge to change it, no desire to prevent it. It just was, and that was okay. Over the next few days, thousands of humans reported the same experience. Military personnel, doctors, nurses, hospice workers, firefighters, and others who had faced death regularly in their work. They had been chosen as reapers. Kate was one of them. So was Jack. A former combat medic named Peter Hayes discovered he could not only see the threads, but sense disruptions in them, places where the natural order had been violated. The alien empires reacted swiftly and harshly. The Velkrin Collective announced that all diplomatic ties with Earth were severed. Human ships were banned from Velkrin space. Any humans currently in Velkrin territory had 30 days to leave. The Oshari Dominion went further. They declared humanity to be corrupted by the death entity and stated that humans posed a danger to all civilized species. They seized human property in Oshari space and expelled all human citizens immediately. The Zenthari Commonwealth, the oldest and most powerful of the three empires, issued an official ultimatum. Their leader, an ancient being named Elder Cross, who had ruled for 12,000 years, spoke directly to Earth. "You have made a grave error," Cross said. His voice was cold and certain. "You have aligned yourselves with entropy, with ending, with the void. We give you 30 days to renounce this partnership. If you do not, the Zenthari Commonwealth will enforce a complete quarantine of human space. No trade, no travel, no communication. You will be isolated from galactic civilization." Earth's government met to discuss the ultimatum. Some argued for backing down. The empires controlled 90% of the galaxy's resources and trade routes. Isolation would be economically devastating, but Ryan Collins stood firm. "We made our choice. The people voted. We don't abandon our principles because they become difficult." Kate worked frantically to assess the situation. The economic impact would be severe. Earth relied on alien technology for dozens of critical systems. Food production, energy generation, medical supplies, all depended partially on galactic trade. The colonies would be hit even harder. 30 days passed. Earth did not renounce the partnership. The quarantine began. It was brutal. Overnight, human ships were turned away from every major trade hub. Contracts were canceled. Supply chains broke down. The stock markets on Earth crashed. There were protests in major cities. Some people blamed the government for the decision. Others blamed those who voted yes in the referendum. But then something unexpected happened. Small species, the ones who had lived under the control of the three great empires for centuries, began to reach out to humanity in secret. The first contact came from a reptilian species called the Dreth. Their ambassador, a female named Sayla, sent an encrypted message to Kate. "We have watched your choice with great interest," the message said. "For 2,000 years, the Dreth have been subjects of the Oshari Dominion. We have no freedom, no autonomy. Our leaders are appointed by the Oshari. Our laws are written by beings who have ruled since before our civilization began. We have longed for change, but change is impossible when those in power never die, never step down, never make room for new ideas. What you have done, choosing mortality, choosing change, it gives us hope." More species reached out. The Shard, a crystalline race known for their art but oppressed by Velcrin oversight. The Moth, insectoid beings who had been mining resources for the Zenthari for 500 years. The Fin, an aquatic species forced to work in water processing facilities throughout the galaxy. They all said the same thing. They were tired of stagnation, tired of eternal rulers, tired of empires that never changed. Humanity's choice had awakened something in them, a desire for the cycle of life and death, growth and renewal that the empires had suppressed. Jack Morrison found himself at the center of this new movement. His ship, the Wanderer, became a meeting point for dissident aliens who wanted to learn more about Death's partnership. He operated in the shadows, beyond the reach of empire law, building a network of those who yearned for change. Meanwhile, Peter Hayes led a team of Reapers to investigate reports of illegal immortality operations. Their first major mission was to a secret Velcrin research station on the edge of known space. Intelligence suggested the station was maintaining thousands of beings in artificial stasis, preventing their natural deaths. When Peter and his team arrived, he immediately saw what Kate had described. The threads of life around the station were tangled and twisted, corrupted by artificial preservation. Inside the facility, they found row after row of clone bodies, kept alive in tanks but empty of consciousness. Velcrin scientists had been storing backup copies of individuals for 600 years, preventing the natural deaths of thousands. Peter could see that these beings should have died centuries ago. Their threads were gray and dead, yet they were kept in a state of false life by machines. The disruption was causing ripples in reality itself, weakening the fabric of existence in the region. "We need to shut this down," Peter told his team. "They didn't kill anyone. They didn't need to. They simply disabled the preservation systems and allowed nature to take its course. The clone bodies, which had never truly been alive, finally faded. The Velcrin scientists protested, called it murder, tried to stop them. But the Reapers had authority from death itself, and when they touched the systems, the machines simply stopped working. Peter watched as the twisted threads finally settled into peace. The natural order was restored. The beings whose deaths had been prevented for centuries were finally allowed to rest. But to the Velcrin collective, this was an act of war. They claimed that humanity had murdered thousands of innocent Velcrin. They demanded justice. They prepared their military for action. The Velcrin fleet arrived at the edge of human space 3 weeks after Peter Hayes shut down the research station. 2,000 warships, each one centuries old but maintained perfectly, each one crewed by warriors who had fought for hundreds of years. They should have been unstoppable. Jack Morrison commanded a small battle group of 20 human ships, positioned at the colony world of New Terra. His orders were simple: delay the enemy as long as possible while civilians evacuated. No one expected him to win. The goal was survival, not victory. Standing on the bridge of his flagship, the Defiant, Jack watched the enemy fleet approach. His crew was young, most of them in their 20s and 30s. They should have been terrified. Instead, they were focused, ready, almost eager. Jack understood why. They had accepted death's partnership. They knew they might die today, and that knowledge freed them. "Admiral Morrison," his tactical officer called out. Lieutenant Ben Carter was 26 years old, fresh out of the academy. "Enemy fleet entering weapons range in 5 minutes. Jack nodded. Then he saw something he had never seen before. The silver threads, the lifelines that all Reapers could see, extended not just from people, but from the ships themselves. Each vessel had a thread, representing its existence, its fate. The Velcrin ships had threads that were old and tangled, complicated by centuries of repairs and modifications. More importantly, Jack could see the threads of the Velcrin crews. They stretched out before him, thousands of them, and they were afraid. Every single thread was vibrating with fear. These warriors had lived for 600, 700, 800 years. They had so much to lose. Jack's own crew had threads too, but they were steady, clear, accepting. They might die today, but they were ready for it. That made all the difference. "All ships, this is Morrison," Jack said over the fleet channel. "Remember your training. Stay mobile, stay unpredictable. They have the numbers, but we have the advantage. We're not afraid to die. They are. Use that." The battle began. The Velcrin fleet advanced in perfect formation, using tactics that were 800 years old. They had worked for 800 years, so why change them? Jack's fleet scattered immediately, breaking all conventional tactics. Human ships darted in random directions, fired from unexpected angles, used maneuvers that made no strategic sense. It was chaos, and chaos was something the Velcrin couldn't handle. Their admirals had commanded fleets for 500 years, using the same strategies, the same approaches. They expected order, expected predictability. Human tactics were neither. Lieutenant Carter proved to be brilliant at calculating impossible angles. Ships dove under the enemy formation, fired up through their weakest shields, then accelerated away before return fire could land. It shouldn't have worked, but the Velcrin hesitated. Every decision took time because every decision might lead to casualties, and casualties were unacceptable. The human ships had casualties. The Defender took a direct hit and lost 20 crew members. The Valiant had to retreat with heavy damage. The Guardian's life support failed on 2 decks, but the humans kept fighting, kept adapting, kept moving. Jack watched the enemy fleet become confused, disorganized. Their commanders were sending conflicting orders, each one trying to avoid losses in their own sections. They weren't thinking about the battle. They were thinking about how to protect the lives of beings who had already lived 8 times longer than any human ever would. Then something extraordinary happened. Death appeared on Jack's bridge. The crew didn't panic. They had been chosen as Reapers. They understood what death represented. The entity stood beside Jack, and looked at the tactical display. "Do you see it?" Death asked quietly. Jack looked at the threads extending from the enemy fleet. Now he saw more than fear. He saw exhaustion. The Velcrin crews were tired. So tired. They had been fighting for centuries, doing the same duties, following the same orders, living the same lives. They didn't want to be here. They couldn't retire, couldn't step down, couldn't pass their duties to younger generations because there was no system for that. They were trapped in eternal service. "They don't want to fight," Jack said. "They don't want to do anything," Death replied. "They simply exist. Survival without purpose is not life. It is merely postponed ending." Death showed Jack more. The Velcrin admiral commanding the fleet was 912 years old. He had commanded fleets for 600 years. He had fought in 47 wars, using the same strategies in each one. He wasn't a bad commander, he was just stuck in patterns that were older than human civilization. Jack made a decision. Open a channel to the Velcrin flagship. His communications officer, Lieutenant Sarah Brooks, looked surprised but complied. "Channel open, sir." "This is Admiral Jack Morrison of the human fleet," Jack said. "I'm speaking to your commanding officer. I want you to know that we don't want this war. We have no desire to destroy you, but we will defend ourselves and we will not back down. We have chosen to work with death, and that choice is not negotiable." There was a long silence. Then a reply came. The voice sounded old and tired. "This is Fleet Commander Vex of the Velcrin Collective. You have murdered our people. You have violated the most sacred law of the galaxy, the preservation of life at all costs." "We didn't murder anyone," Jack replied. "We freed beings who were trapped in a state that was neither life nor death. They were meant to die 600 years ago. We simply allowed the natural order to proceed." "There is nothing natural about death," Vex said. "Death is the enemy. Death is failure. Death is the end of everything worth preserving." Jack thought carefully about his next words. "Commander Vex, how old are you?" A pause. 912 years. "And in those 900 years, have you found peace? Have you found satisfaction? Or are you just going through motions, following orders, doing what you've always done because you don't know what else to do?" Another long pause. Jack could see the threads connecting the Velcrin fleet. They were all listening to this conversation, every single crew member on every ship. "My grandfather died at the age of 98, Jack continued. "He was a farmer. He worked the same land his whole life. In the last year of his life, he taught me everything he knew about farming. He said he was ready to go, ready to let the next generation take over. He died peacefully, knowing that his work would continue through others. Can you say the same, Commander? Are you ready to pass your knowledge to the next generation? Or have you been doing the same job for so long that there is no next generation, just you, forever?" The channel went silent. The battle had paused. Both fleets were waiting. Then Kate Sullivan's voice came through on Jack's private channel. She was on a diplomatic ship nearby. "Jack, I'm picking up communications across the Velcrin fleet. Their crews are talking to each other. This is unprecedented. Velcrin military protocol forbids intership communication during combat." Jack watched the enemy fleet. The ships were holding position, not advancing but not retreating. Something was happening. Then Kate's voice became urgent. "Jack, I'm getting reports from across the galaxy. The broadcast of your conversation with Commander Vex is spreading through every network. It's reaching civilian populations on Empire worlds. They're hearing you talk about passing knowledge to the next generation, about finding peace in endings, about the purpose of limited time." Protests were breaking out on Velcrin worlds. Citizens who had lived for 800 years in the same jobs, the same homes, the same lives, were hearing a human talk about the value of mortality, and something was awakening in them. For the first time in their long lives, they were asking questions. Why did the same 10 individuals rule their government for 4,000 years? Why did nothing ever change? Why did they feel so empty despite having everything? On Kate's ship, she was working frantically with her team to support what was happening. They began broadcasting messages to empire populations, not propaganda, but simple truths, stories of human achievement, of people who lived brief lives but made enormous impacts. Stories of grandparents passing wisdom to grandchildren. Stories of artists who created masterpieces knowing they would never see their long-term impact. Stories of scientists who started projects they would never finish, trusting others to continue their work. The message was simple. Mortality gives life meaning. Endings make stories worth telling. Death is not the enemy. Stagnation is. Back at Newterra, the standoff continued. The Velcrin fleet didn't advance, but they didn't retreat either. Then Commander Vex spoke again. "Admiral Morrison, what you say troubles me. I have not felt troubled in 300 years. I have simply existed following protocols, doing my duty, but now I wonder what the point of my duty is. I have preserved my life for 900 years. Have I lived it?" Jack felt a wave of sympathy for the old commander. "I can't answer that for you, Commander. But I can tell you that every human, no matter how brief their life, struggles with the same question. What gives our lives meaning? We believe it's not the length of time we exist, but what we do with the time we have. If I do not attack you today, I will be replaced," Vex said. "The collective will send another fleet. Another commander. This war will continue." "Maybe," Jack replied. "Or maybe things are already changing. Maybe your people are already asking the questions that will transform your civilization." There was a final long silence. Then Vex made a decision that would echo through history. "I am ordering my fleet to withdraw. Not because you have defeated us, but because I need time to think. 900 years and I need to think about what I have been doing. Perhaps that is the gift you humans offer. The gift of doubt, of questioning, of wondering if there might be a better way." The Velcrin fleet began to turn away. 2,000 warships, retreating not from military defeat but from philosophical uncertainty. Kate watched in amazement as the enemy withdrew without firing another shot. But the war wasn't over. The Oshari Dominion and the Zenthari Commonwealth watched what happened at Newterra, and they were afraid. If the Velcrin could question their immortality, if their citizens could demand change, then the foundations of empire power were threatened. The Oshari prepared their own fleet. The Zenthari began mobilizing their forces. They wouldn't make the same mistake as the Velcrin. They would crush humanity quickly before the infection of mortality could spread further. Peter Hayes, meanwhile, had been investigating more facilities. He found consciousness storage centers where thousands of minds were preserved in digital form, unable to die even though their bodies had failed centuries ago. He found clone farms producing backup bodies at an industrial scale. He found time dilation chambers where beings could live in slowed time, making their lives last millennia instead of centuries. Every facility he shut down released beings who had been trapped for ages. Some were grateful, others were angry, but all of them were finally free to end. 50 years after humanity accepted death's partnership, the galaxy was unrecognizable. Kate Sullivan, now 73 years old, stood at the window of the Alliance headquarters on Newterra and watched ships from 40 different species arrive for the annual council meeting. The alliance of mortal species had grown beyond anything she had imagined. The transformation hadn't been easy. The Oshari Dominion had tried to attack Earth 3 times in the first decade. Each time, they were turned back, not by superior human weapons, but by the same thing that defeated the Velcrin, the awakening consciousness of their own people. Oshari citizens watched humans live brief, meaningful lives and wondered why they felt so empty after 1,000 years of existence. The Zenthari Commonwealth held out the longest. Elder Cross refused to accept that his 12,000-year reign might end. He sent assassins after Kate, after Jack, after Peter. None succeeded. Death protected its partners, and more importantly, the universe itself seemed to bend toward balance now that the cycle was being restored. Kate had spent most of her diplomatic career working with species who wanted to join the alliance. The requirements were simple but radical. Accept natural death, limit artificial life extension to healing and medicine only, and establish term limits for all leadership positions. It meant giving up immortality, giving up eternal power, giving up the idea that life could be preserved forever. 27 species had joined. The Dreth were first, their leader Sela welcoming mortality as liberation from Oshari control. The Shard followed, their crystalline forms naturally existing for only 200 years when not artificially sustained. The Moth, the Fin, and dozens more. Each one made the choice to embrace the cycle. Jack Morrison had retired from military service at age 48, a decision that shocked the alien species who still served in uniform for centuries. He became an instructor at Earth's Naval Academy, teaching young officers the lessons he had learned. He was 68 now, still teaching, still passionate about his work. He had recently announced he would retire completely at 70, wanting to spend his final decades with his family. Peter Hayes ran the Reaper organization, now 1,000 members strong. They traveled the galaxy, finding facilities that trapped beings in states between life and death, closing them down, restoring the natural order. It was difficult work, often dangerous. The empires still resisted in some regions, but gradually, facility by facility, the balance was being restored. The three great empires still existed. They were too vast, too entrenched to collapse completely, but they were no longer stagnant. Reform movements had forced changes. The Velcrin Collective now had term limits for all government positions. No one could serve longer than 200 years. It was still longer than a human lifetime, but it was a start. New leaders were emerging, bringing fresh ideas. The Oshari Dominion had split into factions. Conservative regions clung to the old ways, but progressive areas had adopted alliance principles. Young Oshari were choosing to limit their lives to 300 or 400 years instead of 1,200, saying they wanted to live fully rather than exist endlessly. Even the Zenthari Commonwealth was changing. Elder Cross still ruled, but his power was challenged daily. A reform movement led by younger Zenthari, most only 3,000 or 4,000 years old, demanded he step down. They wanted new leadership, new ideas, new directions. Cross resisted, but Kate could see his threads. The old emperor was tired. So tired. He had ruled for 12,000 years. He had seen civilizations rise and fall, and he was empty inside. Kate had visited him once 5 years ago on a diplomatic mission. She spoke to him privately in his ancient palace. "Why do you cling to power?" she asked him. "You have lived longer than most species exist. What is there left for you to achieve?" Cross looked at her with eyes that had seen epics. "If I step down, I die. The moment I give up my position, my purpose ends. And without purpose, what am I? Just an ancient being waiting for the end." "Everyone is waiting for the end," Kate said gently. "The question is what we do while we wait. My grandfather was a teacher. He retired at 70, knowing he had passed his knowledge to others. He spent his last years traveling, spending time with family, pursuing hobbies he never had time for. He died at 96, peacefully, satisfied. Can you say you will die satisfied?" Cross didn't answer then, but Kate knew he was thinking about it. She could see it in his eyes. Now, 50 years after the choice, Kate prepared to address the Alliance Council. Representatives from 27 species filled the chamber, along with observers from Empire worlds considering membership. Kate's hair was white now, her movements slower, but her mind was sharp. She knew this would be one of her last major addresses. She planned to retire next year, to pass her position to a younger diplomat. "Friends and allies," Kate began. 50 years ago, humanity made a choice that changed the galaxy. We chose to embrace mortality, to accept the cycle of life and death that is fundamental to existence. Many thought we were fools. Many thought we would be destroyed. Instead, we became something new. She gestured to the diverse species in the chamber. You all made similar choices. You gave up the false promise of eternal life for the truth of meaningful existence. And look at what we have built together. In 50 years, the Alliance has produced more art, more science, more innovation than the empires produced in 50 centuries. Why? Because we know our time is limited, because we value each moment, because we build for the future, knowing we won't be here to see it. A young Dreth representative, barely 30 years old, spoke up. What about those who still resist? The Empire factions that cling to immortality? Kate nodded. They will change in time, or they will fade into irrelevance. You cannot stop evolution. The universe itself moves toward balance. Beings who refuse to accept the cycle will find themselves increasingly isolated, increasingly empty. We don't need to force change. We simply need to show a better way. After the council meeting, Kate met privately with Jack and Peter. The three of them had become close friends over the decades, bound by their shared role as the first Reapers, the first to see the threads of life and death clearly. I'm retiring next year, Kate told them. I'll be 74. It's time for someone younger to lead the diplomatic efforts. Jack smiled. I retired 20 years ago. Best decision I ever made. My granddaughter Claire is graduating from the academy next month. She's going to be a fine officer. Peter, now 65, nodded. I'm training my replacement too. The Reaper organization needs younger leaders, people who will carry this forward after we're gone. They sat together in comfortable silence, three old friends who had changed the galaxy. They could see each other's threads, silver and thinning but still bright. They had maybe 20 or 30 years left if they were lucky, and that was okay. They had lived fully, achieved much, and were ready to pass the torch. Do you think Death knew? Jack asked. That we would say yes? Kate considered. I think Death hoped, but it had to be our choice, freely made. That's what makes it meaningful. Peter looked out at the stars. I wonder what happens after. Do you think we'll see what comes next? Does it matter? Kate asked. We've done our part. The next generation will do theirs. That's the whole point. We don't need to see the end of the story. We just need to write our chapter well. Across the galaxy, the changes continued. On a Velcrin world, an ancient council member stepped down after 600 years of service, saying he wanted to finally rest. A younger Velcrin took his place, bringing new energy and ideas. On an Oshari planet, a group of citizens chose to disable their life extension systems, accepting that their 1,000-year lives were enough. They wanted to make room for the next generation. Even in the Zenthari Commonwealth, Elder Cross made a decision. After 12,000 years, after centuries of Kate's words echoing in his mind, he called a press conference. The galaxy watched as the ancient emperor spoke. I have ruled the Zenthari Commonwealth for 12,000 years, Cross said. His voice was tired but clear. I have seen species rise and fall. I have witnessed the birth and death of stars. I have accumulated more knowledge than any being in the galaxy. And I have learned one final lesson from the youngest species in the council, that holding on forever is not strength, but fear. He paused, and the galaxy held its breath. I am stepping down. Within 1 year, I will transfer power to an elected council, and then, for the first time in 12 millennia, I will allow myself to die, not because I am defeated, but because I am complete. My time is done. Let new voices guide the Zenthari into the future. The announcement sent shock waves through the galaxy. The oldest ruler, the most powerful emperor, was choosing to die. It was unthinkable. It was revolutionary. It was the final proof that death's partnership was not a curse, but a gift. Kate watched the broadcast from her home on Earth. She felt tears on her cheeks. It had taken 50 years. But the message had finally reached even the most ancient and resistant. Change was possible. Death was not the enemy. Endings gave life meaning. 20 years later, Kate Sullivan died peacefully in her sleep at the age of 94. She had lived to see the Alliance grow to 40 species. She had seen the empires transform from stagnant tyrannies to evolving civilizations. She had seen humanity's choice validated 1,000 times over. Her funeral was attended by representatives from across the galaxy. Species that had once feared death now celebrated her life. They spoke of her achievements, her wisdom, her courage. And then they let her go, understanding that her ending was not a tragedy, but a completion. Jack Morrison died 2 years later at 70, peacefully, surrounded by family. 3 generations attended his funeral, including his granddaughter Claire, now a captain in the Alliance fleet. She spoke at his service, saying, "My grandfather taught me that life is not measured in years, but in impact. He lived 70 years and changed the galaxy. That is enough." Peter Hayes continued working until 82, finally retiring only when illness forced him to. He spent his last years writing, documenting everything the Reapers had learned about the balance between life and death. He died at 84, his work complete, his knowledge passed on. Death attended each of their funerals, visible only to other Reapers. The entity spoke no words, simply stood as witness, honoring those who had been its first partners among humanity. A new generation of Reapers had emerged, including Claire Morrison. They carried on the work, maintaining the balance, helping species transition from artificial immortality to natural mortality. It was still difficult. Some resisted, some clung to the old ways, but the tide had turned. The galaxy was alive again, truly alive, with all the growth and change and renewal that life required. The 3 great empires still existed, but they were no longer empires in the old sense. They had become more like large federations, with term limits, regular leadership changes, and acceptance of natural death. They still had longer lifespans than humanity, but they no longer clung to immortality as the ultimate good. The alliance of mortal species grew to encompass 70 species. They formed their own trade networks, their own cultural exchanges, their own scientific collaborations. They shared knowledge freely, built projects together, and accepted that they would not live to see all the results. That acceptance made them fearless in their ambitions. Human lifespans remained around 120 years, brief compared to most species, but humans accomplished more in those brief lives than others did in millennia. They lived with urgency, with passion, with the understanding that time was precious because it was limited. And across the galaxy, a new philosophy emerged. It was called the doctrine of completion. It taught that life was not about duration, but about fulfillment. A life of 60 years filled with purpose was better than a life of 6,000 years filled with emptiness. Achievement was not measured in time, but in impact. And every being, no matter how brief their existence, had the potential to change the universe. Death remained present but distant, appearing occasionally to new Reapers, offering guidance but not commands. The entity had no agenda except balance. It did not encourage suicide or reckless behavior. It simply asked that beings accept their mortality, live fully within their natural limits, and then, when the time came, let go gracefully. Claire Morrison, now 45 and an admiral in the Alliance fleet, stood on the bridge of her flagship and looked at the stars. She could see the threads of life connecting everything, just as her grandfather had. She knew she would live maybe another 60 or 70 years if she was lucky, and that was okay. She would use that time well. She would teach the next generation. She would protect the Alliance, and when her time came, she would die peacefully, knowing she had lived a life of meaning. That was the gift death had offered humanity. Not eternal life, but meaningful life. Not endless existence, but purposeful existence. Not the absence of death, but the acceptance of it. And humanity, brief and mortal, burning bright in the darkness of space, had accepted that gift and changed the galaxy forever. The story of why humanity worked for death and not the alien empires was simple in the end. It was because humans understood what the empires had forgotten, that all good things must end, that endings make stories meaningful, that the fear of death is worse than death itself, and that life, finite and precious, is beautiful exactly because it does not last forever. The galaxy had learned this lesson from humanity, and in learning it, the galaxy had come alive again, and with each facility that closed, with each unnatural preservation that ended, the balance of the universe shifted. Reality itself seemed to breathe easier. Death was restoring the cycle that the empires had broken. Kate received reports from across the galaxy. Reform movements were starting on dozens of empire worlds. Young Velcrin were demanding term limits for leaders. Oshari citizens were questioning why the same individuals had controlled their government for 2,000 years. Even in the ancient Zenthari Commonwealth, where change was forbidden and Elder Cross had ruled for 12 millennia, voices of dissent were emerging. The galaxy was waking up from a sleep that had lasted thousands of years. And it was all because humanity had made a choice. They had chosen to embrace death, to accept mortality, to find meaning in brief existence. The empires could send more fleets, could try to crush this awakening, but they were fighting against something more powerful than military might. They were fighting against an idea whose time had come, that life without death is not worth living, and that endings give life its purpose. The war would continue, but the outcome was already clear. Change was coming to the galaxy, whether the empires wanted it or not, and humanity, brief and mortal, would be the catalyst for that change. Back on Earth, Kate received the intelligence. The Velcrin were mobilizing a fleet. Their target was human space. The empires had decided that humanity's choice to work with death was too dangerous to be allowed. They would force humanity to submit, or they would destroy humanity entirely. Kate looked at the reports and felt a chill. The Velcrin fleet numbered over 2,000 ships. Earth's defense forces had perhaps 200 combat-ready vessels. The math was simple and terrifying. The war was coming, and humanity was vastly outnumbered. But as Kate looked at the silver threads connecting everything around her, she saw something the aliens didn't. She saw that their strength was also their weakness. They fought to preserve life because they feared death above all else. Humanity fought with nothing to lose and everything to prove. The empires were about to learn what made humans dangerous. Not their technology, not their numbers, but their acceptance of mortality. A warrior who accepts death is far more dangerous than one who fears it. The galaxy was about to change, whether the empires wanted it or not. "What do you think we'll choose?" he asked. Kate thought about everything she had learned, about the stagnant empires, about death's offer, about what it meant to be human. "I think," she said slowly, "that we're going to surprise ourselves." Jack nodded. "The aliens think we're crazy for even considering this." "Maybe we are," Kate said. "Or maybe we understand something they've forgotten. That life without death isn't really life at all. It's just existence." Back on Earth, the debate had already begun. News of death's offer spread rapidly. Some people were terrified. Others were intrigued. Religious leaders debated the spiritual implications. Scientists analyzed the practical aspects. Philosophers discussed the meaning of mortality. And ordinary people, billions of them, thought about what it meant to be human. The choice would be made in 6 months. But in many ways, humanity had been preparing for this choice since the very beginning. Since the first human understood that life was finite and precious because of it. The only question was whether they would have the courage to choose what they had always known was true. Consciousness transfers. No cheating. You will live your brief lives and die your natural deaths. In a galaxy of immortals, you will remain finite. Ryan didn't answer immediately. He looked at the camera knowing that Earth was watching. This is not a decision I can make alone. I know, Death said. I will give you time. But choose wisely. The galaxy is dying of stagnation. It needs life, real life, with all that entails. Your answer will shape the future of all species. The figure vanished. One moment it was there, the next it was gone. The council chamber erupted in noise as aliens began to return, shouting and arguing. But Jack wasn't paying attention to them. He was thinking about what Death had said. Humanity had to choose. Immortality with the empires or mortality with death. It should have been an easy choice. Who would choose death over eternal life? But as Jack looked at Kate and then at the other humans in the room, he saw something in their faces. They weren't afraid. They were thinking. They were considering it. Maybe death was right. Maybe humanity was different. Maybe being mortal wasn't a weakness. Maybe it was what made them strong. The choice had been offered. Now humanity had to decide.